So I welcome all of you here today, and I'm very happy to welcome Mayor Will Flanagan for opening remarks.
The Bicycle Commission was not official at one point. However, they were doing some great work in getting a lot of the bike paths connected. And sitting down with everybody, I was able to see their vision on how instrumental this could be to the city of Fall River. You know, City Councilor Dave Dennis and his wife Sandy have been very supportive of these initiatives here in the city of Fall River. And I wish Brian was here too. Brian Pearson, who has been instrumental.
And in 2001, Nicole was honored by the U.S. Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. In addition, she has a degree in urban planning and has served as a bicycle planner in California. I was able to meet Nicole a year ago up in her office in Boston, and she has been very encouraging about the work that we're doing here in Fall River. So I'm very happy to introduce Nicole Friedman.
Thanks for having me, Julie. I have no idea where you got that bio. It's accurate. I realized I didn't send you one. And thank you, Mayor Flanagan. One of the things I always say when I talk is the key to success of a great program is your mayor. Your mayor gets it. And I was listening to everything you said, and it was just this checklist of, yes, you get it. So, Fall River, you are poised for great success. So what I'm going to tell you about is how to turn around this city, how to start around the country as a cycle track. And it's important to have off-road paths. People flock to off-road paths. You'll see parents with kids at off-road paths. You'll see senior citizens. In big cities, you can't just carve a path down the middle of a city. But what we started doing in the United States, and this photo's from New York City, is creating a cycle track. And it starts to transform city streets into the protected, safe facility of a path. And what they do is, on the right you see the sidewalk. And in this case, what they did was put the bike lane directly next to the sidewalk. And then there is a paint buffer. It's just paint. And then you have your parked cars. And then your traveling cars. And all of a sudden, the parked cars act as a buffer between the bike lane and the moving cars. You're not going to get sandwiched between the parked cars and the moving cars. And you're right near the sidewalk. This is a standard bike lane costs about $40,000 to install. The $40,000 is for the engineering, the civil engineering of where the lines go, plus the installation of thermoplastic, which is not super cheap. It's not actually paint, it's a material that lasts 5 to 7 years. The average cycle track might be $75,000 to $100,000 for a basic one like this one. If you were to do a bike path, that's a minimum of $1 million a mile. And there's construction involved in that, real construction, moving curves or grinding out, and I don't even know what it is. Don't want to touch it. So basic cycle track. This is really one of the waves of the future across the country, and Chicago's committed to installing 100 miles of cycle track for the city. I'm not sure if Fall River has 100 miles of roads, to be honest. So in New York City, they found a 50 to 300% increase in cycling almost overnight when they put in cycle track. 50.
Without committing you to any number, I'm just curious, in a city of 88,000, like Fall River, what would you guesstimate would be reasonable?
Wait, what's awesome is you could probably have your whole network down, or a majority of the on-street network down in 3 years.
3 years?
So you probably could do, 15, 20 miles in 3 years, and you'd be in fantastic shape. The beauty of bikes is it's cheap and it's fast. So, anyway. So what they found is when you put in a bike lane against parking and you narrow the parking lane, cars park closer to the curb. That's a good thing. The drivers are a little more likely to look behind them when they see a bike lane, when they open their door. With the thing on the right, the cyclist tends to ride a little farther away from the parked car, which is the desired impact. So it works that way. We've also done some mass mailings with our excise taxes. It'll take a long time to really get it. We looked at what's out there in terms of other programs. And there were some programs that would go into the gymnasium, talk for an hour to the kids, drop a watermelon in a helmet, drop a watermelon without a helmet, and then leave the school. The watermelon breaks obviously without the helmet. And we said, we need to do more significant. And we looked at Copenhagen, and they had a program that was 4 sessions long on the bike. And we said, let's do that as our model, because we want to get people to love cycling and get them to know how to ride safe, and really create a lifelong love of cycling. So our programs tend to be 4 sessions long, and to be really cost efficient, we tend to go into a school. We're only there for 2 weeks. We'll see each kid 4 times, groups of 20, classes of 20 or so, and then we move on to another school. And it's cost efficient because the instructors go and they stay all day, and we only have to move the bikes once, and we don't need nearly as many fleets of bikes. So we have about 3 or 4 fleets of bikes that we're doing. I'm going to skip bike share unless people want to learn about bike share. Okay. So I will be quick on bike share because it's a long project. Boston is now one of the only cities in the U.S. to have a bike share program. And when we said, how can we change culture? How can we mainstream cycling? We realized that bike share is just transformative. It has this incredible power to get the average person on a bike. And we looked at these numbers, and they're numbers that, well, I always say city government can move at a glacial pace, but bike share changes things instantly. We looked at Paris. In their first 2 years, they had 54 million trips taken by bike. They were getting 75,000 trips every single day. Just tremendous numbers. Their system is 2,000 stations, 20,000 bikes. Montreal, first North American city to launch. Again, 1 million trips in 5 months. You know, I was salivating over these numbers. And incredible impact on the environment right away. So what the heck is bike share? It started with some really liberal folks in Portland, Oregon, and they said, I got an idea. Let's paint some bikes yellow so they're easily identified, and let's put them out in the city and anyone can use them. And it was fantastic for the first 3 days, and then all the bikes disappeared. So then Amsterdam came along, and they said, we are much smarter than those folks in Portland. They came up with Generation 2, where you stick a coin into a machine, and you take your bike, your coin is your deposit, and then you flip it in the canal, because who cares about your 10-cent coin? So all those bikes ended up in a canal. We hit our 3-year goal, which was to be awarded a bike-friendly city by League of American Bicyclists at the silver level. And I say I think we're the only city that's gone from, you know, that started a bike program and in 3 years made it up to the silver level. There's very few cities of substantial size that are at that level, but I do know we're the only city that's gone from worst to silver because we held worst so long that there was no one else competitive. And we were rated by Bicycling Magazine the future best city, which must have killed them after rating us worst for so many years. And it's been interesting. I got a call the other day from Dallas, and they said, Nicole, what do I do? We just got ranked the worst cycling city in the country. And I seemed very empathetic. I'm so sorry, that's terrible. And I hung up. I'm like, oh my God, thank God that's not us anymore. Copenhagen hasn't called yet, by the way. So that's sort of the presentation that could be a conversation starter, conversation finisher. And I had to put a slideshow together for you guys for the fun of it. This is what you will not see in Boston. But feel free to ask questions while the slides are running. And these are all real. This is why sometimes outsourcing engineering is okay.
Yeah, we've got that one.
That's part of the education right there. Shortest bike lane in the world. You have good balance. That one actually might be Boston. You didn't see that one. So what other questions are there?
We have Kim Copeland from DOT is here, but, so I wanted to ask about just working with the state and how that has worked with DOT and the city.
They've been very supportive. Boston's really interesting. There's so many jurisdictions, you know, in our road system. Some roads are owned by DOT, some are by Conservation Recreation, some are Mass Highway, some are Boston. So we have to work with everyone. Our standards are a little different than DOT. Will accept narrower lane widths, but DOT is starting to allow the lane widths that we have. They were a huge part of funding for bike share. A lot of the money flows through the state, so our biggest grant flows through the MBTA, which is Mass DOT, all the time. They own all the bridges from Boston to Cambridge. The bridges in Boston are sort of the critical link in the path, and we're working to get bike lanes in all of them.
I live in a smaller community.
Yeah.
Here we have an off-road bike path that intersects two feeder roads for residential neighborhoods. And the bike path's been in place since 2009, and there's a lot of people who are very vocal, whether it's either the bikers or the people who live on those roads, about the intersection.
Yeah.
And everybody is terrified that we're going to see somebody get hit by a car there because bikers don't stop.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And so I guess. And let's see, the police. You know, what are the steps to resolving? You know, coming up with the best resolution for those kinds of situations where it's education and it's infrastructure or engineering.
For the infrastructure, our philosophy is get advice from the best. So when we bid out our engineering contract, we called what we knew were the best companies in the country and made sure they bid. And that was the best decision we ever made, because we don't have to tell them, please do this. They tell us, in this city, this city, this city, this is the best practice. You know, what you're describing, it could just be like a tabletop crossing where the cars are forced to stop. Good design breeds good behavior, and bad design likewise. That seems more like an infrastructure challenge than an education enforcement, the way you describe it. And yeah, we just call everyone to get the answers. Minuteman is, I don't know if it's the best example or a poor example of the crossings. It would be interesting to see. So if you have a bike path crossing a road,
Yeah.
if you put up a little stop sign, the cars may or may not stop, and the bikes are not especially likely to stop either. But if you have, instead of a speed bump where the bike path goes, it's raised, so the cars have to go over the bump to cross. The cars are forced to stop, essentially, or go very slow, and it makes for a safe crossing. They're not, again, that could be $50,000 though, so.
Yeah, plus it's no punishment.
Yeah, I think tabletops have less of that issue. And then you can look at, okay, if we can't afford a tabletop, can you use a lot of paint? Can you use color? What about, you know, something in the middle that says, you know, one of those stand-up signs that everyone runs over that says, you know, path crossing. But, so there's multiple tools in the toolbox of different costs.
I had an idea. You paint like
They now have something in some cities where they're painting what looks like a speed bump, but it's not an actual speed bump. And it works the first 2 times you go over it. And then after that, you know, there's a learning curve.
We'll have the real thing.
Exactly.
Julie was asking about earlier about how to better educate people in terms of, and motorists in terms of sharing the roadways. I just wanted to point out, and you may be aware of this, that MassDOT has embraced what's known as a complete streets policy. When MassDOT is involved in reconstructing federally eligible roadways, we must accommodate or actually analyze and determine how best we can accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians. So I can tell you I've been involved in planning since roughly 2,000, and there's been a sea change in MassDOT's vision in terms of better accommodating bicyclists and pedestrians. And in recent months, MassDOT, through the Bay State Roads program at UMass Amherst, has instituted some complete streets training across the state for public officials. And I think it's even emanating now into additional training for cities and towns. I'm not sure, Adam, has it come down to this part of the state? I know there was some sessions in the Boston, Cambridge area, and I think there's supposed to be some additional training in the regions outside of Boston and Worcester. So I would look at the Bay State Roads website, and I believe there is more training coming for the cities and towns across the Commonwealth. Thank you.
I know we spoke briefly the other night at the local bike committee meeting, the unofficial one, before the official one gets started. And there was some discussion about the benefits of having a bike event in the city. I don't think there's any significant bike event down on the south coast, we like to call ourselves. My interest would be to have a bike event down here. So, you know, do you have any suggestions, briefly, about how we could do that? What would be appropriate for our area?
People love to do what's illegal, so
Illegal?
closing roads.
It's good for my business.
The two biggest attractions for rides are closed roads and water. So if you create a route on closed roads and water, they will come.
We have a lot of water that we
And
don't
then you
use.
bring your mayors and bring any famous people out, and that will be your draw. But there's 1,001 charity rides out there, so you could create a charity ride, but I think what you guys have is, you are the city, create a city ride, because that's your asset. You know, your asset is your roads that you can close.
Is that like an annual event? Would that be something we do annually? Or?
You probably would want it, and you can piggyback on Bike Week, because there's a lot of...
What is Bike Week?
It's May, usually the third week in May. The weather can be a little iffy, but that'll tend to get a bigger crowd out for you, or it's a more automatic crowd. It's a natural time to do it.
You talked about residential city neighborhoods. About half of about 13,500 acres of Greater Fall River is a bioreserve,
Okay,
which has within it, have you been through it?
I'm not, no.
Okay. It has several roads in it, which are barely accessible by foot. And you could bicycle on a mountain bike.
Yeah.
People have been reticent to repave these roads, because then you would have essentially motor speedways
Yeah.
running up and down through the, and I guess the closest thing around Boston would be the Blue Hills Reservation, or possibly Middlesex Fells.
Sure.
You got any, and it's basically, in terms of, there's no bike lanes, there are dirt roads, there's a confusion of off-trail roads and then off-road vehicles, motorcycles, some bicycles. Comment.
So I don't know.
What do we do?
You know, you have options, and you probably want to look at it. One is, it might be fine, and you just encourage people to have bikes that can go off-road, and that's what Fall River is. Could be that you try to do some stone dust paths through there, because a road bike can go on stone dust, but it's not pavement. But Vermont's not dissimilar. Vermont off of the main highways, it's all dirt roads. So it could be okay, and people just get the correct bike.
It's actually a pretty big asset, because
Yeah.
we ride in Freetown State Forest, and to be able to have an off-road cycling community and an on-road cycling community is really important. And this is one of the largest off-road state parks for riding that you can. Yeah, Freetown.
Yes, I have done there.
Yeah, and
It's huge.
it's huge, and it's multi-use. It's one of the only ones in this whole New England that is cycling. We were out this weekend, there were people with dog, sleds, and I mean, that's great to have as many people using it as possible, so. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. If there's some cross trails that, can take you through the woods, if there's just some sort of way that you could have a road bike could ride on that, on a median or something along those lines, without paving the entire thing, because I think that would probably take it backwards if you had to pave it, but,
Yeah, yeah, you would want to pay them
yeah.
Most of the commuting riding is going to be on the streets. Anyway, the average trip is about 1 or 2 miles, and it's, in the dense areas, trying to get from home to school to work to community center. You had a question, actually.
Yeah, and I almost forgot it, then I recall it. I like the comment you made about people like to ride on areas that are illegal. So I like the idea about the city has the power to close off certain sections. How do residents that are impacted by those closings, temporary as they are, how do they react to that?
Well, it's usually a Sunday morning, so they're not impacted that much, and you do watch out for church. It's becoming, around the country, a big deal to try to close roads. They call it Sunday streets, and sort of take back the streets and show that there's more than the car. So it's surprising how little pushback there is. If it's done right and you do it in a business area, there could be some complaints the first year, so it's a pilot. But if you draw the huge crowd, it's a gigantic boom for them. A great example is Philadelphia has always had the professional race, the Liberty Classic, and they would shut down a large portion of the city, including Maniac Wall. 10 years later, Maniac Wall, which was kind of a down-and-out area, is this thriving, young, hip area because people were drawn to it and they started moving there, and it transformed that whole neighborhood. So there's a lot of positives to it. But you do have to go out and communicate a lot and work a lot with neighbors to try it.
Right. If I could ask, does it become expensive because you must need police details?
Yeah, so when we do our Hub on Wheels ride, we're closing down Storrow Drive and then a number of roads in the street. The police pay for their own time, and then we pay the state police. And it's about $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. Again, we have sponsorship, and actually for the ride we have a lot of registration fees because we charge for the ride that covers it. If you can get away with not charging for the ride, it's a much, it would be fantastic. Actually, you had a question.
Well, just back to the state forest.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of anybody who did a bike lane but didn't pave the street? So the automobiles have to go through the ruts and the puddles, but you have a bike lane along one side that a car can't ride on, but a bicycle can.
That's awesome. No, I have not.
Well, let's do it here.
That'll put you on the map. That's a huge statement. That's really cool. I usually try to call anyone that hasn't talked first, but we'll go back there again.
Just on the question about police details.
Yes.
This is about closing roads. This is about bike rides when people are looking for police escorts. Do you have any comment on that? Because my own thought, like if you wanted to do a regional ride, is that sometimes having the police there makes people think it's not safe to be riding on a road. So I'm wondering, do you have
So we went through that with our Bike Week and Bike Friday events. Those are the events that I mentioned where we had escorted rides into the city the last Friday of every month. And they're 3 to 7 miles. In the first couple of years, we actually had the police as part of the escort. And they would do what I call a rolling enclosure, where they would let the cyclists go through all of the lights. And it was a big draw for people. Like, again, it's something that's illegal, so it made it fun, and it made it a special event. That police group actually can no longer do it for different funding reasons. We did hear from some of the more senior, well, I don't want to say senior advocates, some of the more extreme advocates that, well, this is sending the wrong message. And we balanced, are we really sending the wrong message? Are we doing something that's fun, that's going to engage new people and get them excited? And we said, you know what? We think people are smart enough to know that this is just a fun event and we want to make it a good time. So that's why we did it. So we went that route. We have heard that comment, but we felt like this was stronger. Fun, attractive, appealing, exciting.
City, we're working regionally from Fall River to Wareham, which is, complicated in that there's so many different kinds of towns and cities. But one of the things that we're working on would be bridges, but also trains, abandoned rails, but also rails that are only active once a week or twice a week, that kind of thing. And so rail to trail, but also rail and trail would be the, and that is in the Serpent plan. But can you speak to that at all in your experiences? We feel like it's a hard thing to push the either the managers or perhaps, I don't know about the department, but in terms of working with the rail.
I'm not great on answering that.
Okay.
Let me give you Tool Design Group. That's our consultant that we work with a lot. That's one of the best in the country. Ask for Nick.
Okay.
617-619-9910, extension 200. The other great resource is League of American Bicyclists. They can tell you sort of best practices anywhere, and I don't know their number. They're in DC. But I think they'll have accurate information. I could make something up if you want.
Nick, was that where?
Yeah, Nick's Tool Design.
Tool Design.
So that's when I was mentioning how we bid out our project and wanted one of the best in the country. They've written a lot of the guidelines for everything. They're spot on, brilliant. So.
But I'm wondering, is there anybody? Does anyone else have any other ideas or concerns that they would like Nicole to see out there in the city as we drive around?
Well, since you're in that area, you might get her idea on connecting to the bike, to the waterfront.
Yeah.
Bike path there, the walking path.
The quick, just the map up there. But yeah, I was thinking of heading over that way.